At Christmas dinner, Dad snapped, demanding I cover the bills again. Whispered. You're just jealous of your sister. I smiled, then let her pay the $9,600. The next morning, sirens, tears, and chaos filled the house, as my phone blew up with panicked calls. I always believed Christmas was supposed to be a time for family, for coming together. But what if the very people you'd sacrificed everything for, your entire savings, years of your life, looked you in the eye on Christmas night and told you, you were nothing, just a jealous outsider who didn't belong? What would you do? Because that's exactly what happened to me, Hannah Miller, last Christmas. And let me tell you, what followed shook that entire house to its foundation. You won't believe how quickly everything turned. Let's go back to where it all began. I grew up in a quiet neighborhood in Lansing, Michigan, in a two-story house with faded blue siding and a roof that always leaked. It held every memory of my childhood, the good ones, and the kind that shaped the quiet bitterness I carried into adulthood. My dad, Robert, worked for decades at the auto plant, his hands scarred, walking with the pride of steady employment. My mom, Linda, worked part-time at a dentist's office, coming home with tired eyes, making dinner as if exhaustion was just part of the routine. Then, in 2010, everything changed. The plant downsized and Dad was let go. I was in college, but I remember coming home to a silence so thick you could choke on it. Dad sat in his recliner, shoulders slumped, remote slipping from his hand. Overdue notices started piling up, and at night, whispered arguments seeped through the walls. That's when I first understood what it felt like for a home to be truly unstable. Even before that, I knew exactly where I stood. I was the reliable firstborn, the one who never caused trouble. I followed the rules, studied hard, and stayed quiet. My younger sister, Jessica, was 6 years younger, and in their eyes, she was the shining star. If she scraped by with a C average, she was celebrated. I still remember one Christmas. Jessica, fresh off a barely passing school year, got a brand new pink bicycle with a woven basket. Mom clapped with delight. Dad knelt to adjust the training wheels, his face glowing with pride. I stood nearby, holding my report card with straight A's, waiting for someone to notice. Dad glanced over, a quick pat on the shoulder. Keep it up, kiddo. Then turned back to Jessica. That was it. That was the moment I learned that doing well would never be enough to make me special. It wasn't just that holiday. Jessica always got more. The larger bedroom, new clothes, while mine were hand-me-downs. At school events, Dad's voice boomed for her, even for a participation ribbon. When I accepted an academic award, his applause was polite, almost absent. Another time, Jessica came home with a 60% on a math worksheet. Mom kissed her forehead, said she did her best, and announced ice cream to celebrate. That same week, I'd placed first in the regional spelling bee. My ribbon stayed folded in my backpack. No one asked, so I said nothing. That night I lay awake, wondering why my best never seemed enough. Around then I realized Jessica had learned to play into it. She acted like applause was hers by default. She'd interrupt me at dinner, and if I objected, Dad would scold me for being too harsh. Mom always said Jessica was sensitive, needing extra encouragement. I was strong enough to manage without it. As years passed, nothing changed. Jessica's confidence soared, fueled by constant praise, while I became the quiet achiever, convinced I'd never measure up. I pinned my hopes on the idea that someday my hard work would force them to see me. When Dad lost his job, the favoritism only deepened. Jessica was still in high school, and they poured what little they had into keeping her life comfortable. Cheerleading, hot meals, spending money. Meanwhile, I juggled part-time shifts at the campus library, and tutored just to cover my books and meals. Their best was always reserved for Jessica. That imbalance became the quiet wound I carried into adulthood. It's hard to explain what it feels like to grow up unseen, to know that no matter how much you give, it will never be enough. That knowledge sat in the back of my mind through every success, every sacrifice. And it was the reason why, years later, at a Christmas dinner that should have been filled with warmth, the imbalance finally exploded in a way none of us could undo. When I graduated from Michigan State in 2013 with a computer science degree, I thought I'd finally earned my freedom. 4 years of student loans, night shifts, tutoring, endless coffee. My diploma felt like a ticket out, a way to step outside their shadow. But even with that piece of paper, I already carried a weight I knew I could never put down. Those early years were brutal. Rent was high, debt piled up. My friends celebrated with summer trips. I took extra shifts at a diner, balancing greasy burgers just to cover interest payments. Then, in 2015, I landed my first real job in Detroit. Midwest FinTech Solutions. A salary that felt like a fortune. I moved into a modest one-bedroom, bought a used Honda Civic, and for the first time, I felt a flicker of pride in my own stability. That's when the phone calls started. First, Mom checked in with friendly questions. How was work? How was the city? Then the tone shifted. Late fees, a leaking roof, Dad's unemployment checks running dry. One evening, she cried quietly into the receiver about their car being repossessed. I sat on my apartment floor, staring at my own stack of bills, and felt the guilt rise like smoke. So I offered to help. It started as a one-time payment. Then it became a monthly mortgage check, $800. Add $400 for utilities, $600 for the car. Suddenly, I was covering nearly every major expense. By the time I included cell phones, internet, even streaming services, it totaled almost $30,000 a year. 8 years later, that number would hit nearly $250,000. Money that could have gone into my retirement, a down payment on a house, money that could have let me breathe. Instead, it vanished into the black hole of my parents' household, with barely a thank you. Jessica, meanwhile, was living a completely different life. Culinary school, funded by my parents, of course. When that failed, they funded her dream of a coffee cart. Lasted 6 months. Then an online boutique, a crypto investment group, eventually a wellness app. Each time she called it her big break. Each time it ended in failure, and through it all my parents stood by her with unwavering support. I can't count the times I sat at their kitchen table, watching Dad brag about Jessica's entrepreneurial spirit, while Mom smiled proudly. They talked about her as if she were destined for greatness, while I sat quietly, the daughter whose steady paychecks kept the lights on. If I mentioned the stress of carrying both my life and theirs, Dad would just wave me off. Family helps family, he'd say. But it never felt like family was helping me. One night in 2017 still burns in my mind. I just returned from a brutal week at work, 12-hour days. I drove to Lansing with bags of groceries and 2 envelopes of cash. Jessica breezed through the door in a brand new leather jacket. Announced she was thinking of starting a podcast and might need some startup money. Mom clapped like it was the most brilliant idea she'd ever heard. Dad reached for his wallet to hand her gas money. No one asked how my project went. No one even noticed I brought the groceries. That was the rhythm of my 20s. Long commutes, late nights, living in a modest apartment while funneling thousands into a house I no longer lived in. I traded vacations for emergency furnace repairs. I postponed buying a reliable car so they could replace theirs. Every raise I earned disappeared before I could enjoy it. My best friend Lauren put it bluntly over cheap wine one night. You do realize they are using you, right? I laughed it off. They're my parents, Lauren. What am I supposed to do? Let them lose the house? She just shook her head. There's a difference between helping and being an ATM with legs. Her words burrowed into me. The truth was hard to face. Every time I sent money, I told myself it was temporary, but it never was. My parents became comfortable with the arrangement. Jessica became entitled to it. I became the silent provider, the dependable one, the daughter who always cleaned up their mistakes. Sometimes I looked at my bank statements and felt sick. $30,000 a year gone year after year. Vacations skipped, a house never bought, relationships strained because I was always too tired, too broke. I told myself it was family duty, but the resentment grew heavier. I was 28 when I realized I hadn't lived a year of adulthood without paying their bills. By 32, I'd given them more money than I'd saved for myself. And still Jessica remained the star. Mom called her ambitious. Dad called her visionary. I was never called anything at all. That's when the word formed in my mind, sharp and bitter, ATM. And the worst part? They didn't even see it as unusual. It was just my role, carved into stone since childhood. Even now, I feel the ache of exhaustion, the long drives, the quiet phone calls, the way I swallowed my frustration until it hardened into silence. I told myself it was only money, that love was worth the sacrifice. But the truth was written in every canceled vacation, every sleepless night, every empty savings account. I was their safety net, their unspoken plan B. Jessica was their dream. That imbalance, which began in childhood, had only deepened. And it was leading me, step by painful step, toward a breaking point I never saw coming. Lauren saw it most clearly. She'd been my closest friend since college. We'd open a bottle of wine, curl up, and talk until midnight. One night, after I complained about another unexpected bill, she set her glass down hard. Her dark eyes were steady. You do realize they are taking advantage of you, right? I laughed nervously. They're my parents, Lauren. What am I supposed to do? Let the lights get shut off. She shook her head. That's exactly what I mean. You think their survival depends on you. Doesn't. You're the one holding everything together, while they keep treating you like the reliable backup plan. I tried to argue, but the words caught in my throat. There was truth there, but I trained myself not to look too closely. A week later, she came to my apartment. I had this glass jar on my shelf, my emergency fund. A few 20s, some loose change, all I could spare after paying my parents' bills. Lauren picked it up, turned it slowly. Then she let out a sharp laugh. That's not an emergency fund, Hannah. That's your guilt jar. I frowned. What do you mean? She sat down, leaning forward. You put money in there for them, don't you? You think if you have it ready when they call, you can bail them out. That's not savings. That's you carrying their weight before they even ask. Her words stung because they were true. I opened my mouth to deny it, but she kept going. Every time you put $1 in here, you're reminding yourself that their needs come before yours. That is not family. That is manipulation. My face heated with a mix of embarrassment and anger, even though I knew she was right. They're my parents, I repeated, softer this time. They gave me everything when I was growing up. Lauren raised an eyebrow. Did they? Did they really give you everything? Or did they give Jessica everything while you figured out the rest on your own? That question hung in the air. I wanted to snap back to defend Mom and Dad, but my mind went blank. Memories flickered instead. Jessica's bike gleaming under the Christmas tree, my spelling bee ribbon tucked away, Dad's voice booming for her. Lauren must have seen the change in my expression because her voice softened. I'm not saying you have to cut them off tomorrow. I'm saying you deserve to live your own life without being drained dry. At some point you have to ask yourself when enough is enough. That night after she left, I sat on my couch staring at the jar. Guilt echoed in my head. I'd always thought of it as a symbol of my responsibility. Now it looked like a chain, tying me to a family that would never notice the sacrifices behind it. The next morning Mom called. Her voice sweet, almost rehearsed. Hannah honey, the water heater has gone out again. It's freezing. I glanced at the jar. I could almost feel Lauren's judgment in the silence of my apartment. I transferred the money anyway, muttering I'd rebuild my savings later. At work that week, my manager congratulated me on a project, praising my leadership. My coworkers clapped. For a moment I felt the pride I'd been chasing my whole life. Then my phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. Just got a new leather jacket. You wouldn't believe the deal I found. I knew without asking Mom or Dad had paid for it. The pride dissolved instantly into something bitter. Lauren invited me over again. They asked you for money again, didn't they? I sighed, nodding. Hannah, this is not sustainable. You are building a life for yourself. They are adults. They can figure it out. I wanted to tell her she didn't understand that I owed them for raising me. But even as the words formed, they rang hollow. What had they really given me besides expectations? The constant reminder that Jessica's failures mattered more than my successes. That night I couldn't sleep. The jar sat in the corner, glowing faintly in the streetlight. I kept seeing Lauren's face when she called it my guilt jar. She was right. It wasn't just about money. It was about a lifetime of being trained to believe my worth came from what I could provide, not from who I was. For the first time, I wondered what would happen if I stopped. If the next time Mom called, I said no. The thought terrified me, but it also sent a strange ripple of relief through my chest, like opening a window in a stifling room. Was I truly helping them? Or was I letting myself be used because it was easier than facing the truth? The answer felt too heavy to face. But the doubt had been planted, and nothing would feel the same again. By December 2023, I just finished leading the biggest project of my career. My team delivered a new banking platform ahead of schedule. My manager called me into his office, shook my hand, and said I had leadership potential. There was talk of a promotion. For the first time in years, my hard work might finally translate into something tangible for me, not just for the bills I paid for others. The glow lasted barely a day before Mom called. Her voice, that familiar mix of casual and commanding. Hannah, we've been thinking it might be best if you host Christmas this year. The house feels a little too. Been smiling for hours, ignoring the sting, pretending not to notice the lack of gratitude. As I closed the oven door, I knew deep down that no amount of effort would ever make them see me differently. The house was full of holiday scents, but underneath it all lay a tension so thick it was hard to breathe. The celebration hadn't even begun, yet the weight of dismissal settled heavy on my shoulders. Then the front door opened with a rush of cold air, and Jessica's laugh filled the hallway before I even saw her. She arrived nearly an hour late, her boots clicking against the tile as if the whole evening had been waiting on her. Dad jumped up, his face lighting up in a way I hadn't seen all day. There she is, the star of the show. Mom hurried in, arms wide, wrapping Jessica in a hug so tight it looked desperate. Jessica tossed her shiny hair. Sorry I'm late. Had to stop by a friend's to talk about my new business idea. Dad beamed as if she just revealed a winning lottery ticket. I stood in the kitchen doorway, wiping my hands, trying to calm the burn rising in my chest. Their glow at her arrival was a sharp contrast to the silence that had met me that morning. Jessica dropped her purse, leaned back, crossing her legs. So, I've been working on something big. A fitness app. It's going to revolutionize home workouts. Dad leaned forward, nodding. Tell us more, sweetheart. Jessica's eyes sparkled. I have the concept all mapped out. It just needs funding, maybe $40,000 to get the prototype built and marketing launched. But once it takes off, it'll be huge. Mom clasped her hands. That sounds incredible, Jess. You always have such ideas. Dad grinned proudly. I listened quietly for a moment, my pulse quickening. Then I asked, what makes it different from the hundreds of apps already on the market? Do you have developers lined up? Have you researched the failure rate in that industry? Jessica's smile faltered. She waved a hand dismissively. I'm not worried about competition. Mine will have a unique angle. You wouldn't understand, Hannah. I took a slow breath. I actually work in tech. I know how investors think. You need more than just an idea. Before I could finish, Mom cut in sharply. Don't ruin Christmas, Hannah. Let your sister share her dream without all the criticism. The room went silent. I looked at Jessica, who smirked. You know what your problem is, Hannah? You're so boring. Always safe. Always stuck in your little cubicle world. Some of us actually take risks. Her words hit harder than I expected. I thought of the nights I stayed up until 2 a.m. coding, the weekends sacrificed to projects, the money I poured into keeping their home afloat. I wanted to remind her of all the times her risks had ended in disasters. The food truck that never got off the ground, the boutique that swallowed thousands, the crypto scheme that left them nearly broke. I couldn't stop myself. Jess, how many times have you borrowed money and never paid it back? How many projects have you started only to drop them when it got hard? Jessica's face flushed red, her eyes narrowing. That's different. At least I'm trying to do something big with my life. You're just jealous. Dad's voice rose from across the room. Enough, Hannah. Don't drag down your sister. Tonight is about family. Family. The word stung like a slap. I bit the inside of my cheek and turned back to the kitchen, forcing myself to stir the potatoes, even though my hands trembled. Behind me, I could hear Jessica laughing again, already spinning her dream as if my questions had never been asked. Mom's encouraging hums, Dad's booming voice carried through the air, filling the space with their unwavering faith in her. Natalie came in quietly to help me set the table. She glanced at me, her voice low. Don't let her get to you. We all know how it goes. I gave her a tight smile, grateful but too tired to answer. As I placed silverware carefully, I could still hear Jessica talking about influencers and sponsorships. Each word was another reminder of the gulf between us, of how she could fail a dozen times and still be praised for dreaming, while I was dismissed for building something real. By the time I lit the candles, the atmosphere had shifted completely. For Mom and Dad, the holiday truly began the moment Jessica walked in. For me, the air was heavier than ever, filled with the sharp edge of dismissal and the familiar ache of being the outsider in my own family. The table was finally set, every dish steaming and ready, silverware shining under the candlelight. I carried the last tray of roasted vegetables into the dining room, hands trembling slightly from the weight. Everyone took their seats. Dad at the head, Jessica right beside him, Mom across from her. I noticed the placement immediately. I was at the far end, wedged between Aunt Barbara and Natalie, as though the work I had poured into this evening was not reason enough to sit near the center of attention. Dad cleared his throat. The room fell silent. He bowed his head. Lord, we thank you for this food, for bringing us together this Christmas, and for the blessing of having Jessica home with us. His voice was strong, deliberate. I lifted my eyes for a second, waiting for my name to follow, for even the faintest acknowledgement that I had been the one to make all of this possible. But it never came. He ended the prayer quickly and we all murmured, Amen. As dishes passed around, Jessica picked up her fork with a flourish. So, I have something I need to share with everyone. She dabbed her lips with a napkin and launched into her pitch. It's a fitness app unlike anything on the market. The way people are focused on health now, it's the perfect time. I just need about $40,000 to get the prototype built and start the marketing push. Once it takes off, it's going to change the game. Mom clasped her hands, smiling. That sounds incredible, Jess. You always think so big. Dad nodded, his chest puffed out. Our daughter, the entrepreneur. I stabbed at the mashed potatoes on my plate, my stomach turning. Finally, I said, keeping my voice steady, what makes this app different from the hundreds already out there? Have you done any research on competition or customer needs? Jessica's smile tightened. She waved her fork in the air. Hannah, you always worry too much. It'll have a unique angle. I'm not going to share the specifics here. People steal ideas all the time. You know, I pressed gently. Investors will need more than just an idea. They'll want numbers, proof, strategy. Mom cut in sharply, her voice edged with warning. Don't ruin Christmas with all your negativity. Let your sister dream. The table went quiet again. Only the clinking of silverware. Jessica smirked, leaned back in her chair. You know what your problem is, Hannah? You live such a boring little life. Safe jobs, safe choices. You're too afraid to take risks, and that's why you'll never do anything extraordinary. Her words stung, not because I believed them, but because they echoed what my parents had always implied. I thought of the long nights I'd spent coding, the projects I'd led, the sacrifices I'd made. I thought of the bills I paid month after month to keep this very house standing. My blood pulsed hot in my ears. I set down my fork and looked directly at Jessica. Do you want to talk about risks? How many times have you borrowed money and never paid it back? How many ventures have you started and abandoned when it got too hard? The food truck, the boutique, the crypto scheme, all disasters, all funded by Mom and Dad. And when that wasn't enough by me. Jessica flushed crimson, her eyes darting toward Mom and Dad. That's different. At least I'm brave enough to try. You just hide behind your paycheck. Dad's voice thundered from the head of the table. Enough. Stop tearing your sister down. I took a slow breath, my voice calmer than I felt. I'm not tearing anyone down. I'm telling the truth. For 8 years I have been paying for this house to stand. $800 a month for the mortgage, $400 for utilities, $600 for car payments. Add insurance, phones, internet, streaming, emergencies. Every year nearly $30,000 gone. Over 8 years, that's close to $250,000. Forks froze halfway to mouth. Aunt Barbara's eyes widened. Uncle George leaned back, stunned. Natalie stared at me as if hearing all of this for the first time. Jessica opened her mouth, but no words came. Mom's face drained of color, her hand shaking as she set down her glass of wine. Dad slammed his fist against the table so hard the plates rattled. You think paying bills makes you family? It doesn't. Family is about loyalty, not money. Get out. The words hit harder than his fist. My own father screaming at me to leave the home I'd been quietly supporting all these years. I swallowed hard, feeling the room spin. Mom leaned closer, her voice sharp but quiet. Meant for me alone. You're just jealous of your sister. You always have been. That was the knife twisting deeper. After all the sleepless nights, the missed vacations, the financial sacrifices, that was how she defined me. Jealous. I pushed my chair back slowly, the legs scraping against the floor. My hands were steady now, though my chest burned with the weight of every unspoken word. Fine. If that is how you feel, then let her pay the bills. Gasps rippled across the table. Jessica's face turned scarlet. She looked to our parents, desperate for them to shield her. Dad glared at me, but the fury in his eyes no longer scared me. Aunt Barbara reached out, then stopped herself. Uncle George shook his head, his face clouded with disbelief. Natalie sat frozen, fork still in hand, eyes wide. I laid my napkin gently on the table beside my plate. For once my voice was calm and clear. I'm done pretending. I'm done carrying the weight and being treated like I don't exist. The room stayed silent, thick with the shock of what I had said. The only sound was the faint whistle of the wind outside and the steady beat of my heart. I picked up my purse, slung it over my shoulder, and looked once at the table where every face showed something different. Rage, guilt, shock, shame. Then I turned toward the hallway, each step away from that table feeling like a release I'd waited my whole life to take. Natalie caught up to me in the hallway, her hand brushing my arm. Her voice trembled but carried more strength than I expected. Please don't let them make you feel small, Hannah. We all see how much you do, even if they never say it. I managed a weak smile, squeezed her hand and whispered, thank you, before pulling my coat tight and stepping out into the cold night. The air hit me like ice. For a moment I just stood on the porch, staring at the snow swirling under the streetlight. Behind me I could still hear muffled voices rising at the table, but I no longer cared to decipher them. My car sat alone in the driveway, a thin layer of frost coating the windshield. I slid into the driver's seat, fingers stiff as I turned the key. The engine rumbled to life, and with it came a sob that tore its way out of my chest. I drove through Lansing, tears blurring the streetlights into streaks of gold. By the time I reached the highway toward Detroit, the sobs had quieted into shaky breaths. Still, I couldn't face the emptiness of my apartment yet. On impulse, I turned off at an exit and followed the winding road to Riverside Park, a place I hadn't been in years. The Grand River was dark and still, the trees bare against the winter sky. I parked near the overlook and shut off the engine. The silence was deafening. I buried my face in my hands and finally let go, crying so hard my whole body shook. Every word from that table echoed in my head. Paying bills doesn't make you family. You're just jealous. The weight of 8 years of sacrifice pressed down on me until I felt like I might collapse. A soft knock on my window startled me. It was Lauren, her face pale from the cold, but full of determination. I unlocked the door, and she slid into the passenger seat without a word, wrapping her arms around me. I don't know what happened exactly, but I know you're done, she murmured. You can't keep letting them bleed you dry. I wiped my eyes and told her everything. The prayer that never mentioned me. The app pitch. The outburst. The moment Dad screamed at me to leave. Lauren listened without interrupting, her hand steady on my arm. When I finished, she exhaled slowly. Hannah, it's time. You have carried them long enough. They disowned you tonight. You have to let them live without you. Her words settled into me with a clarity I had never allowed before. I thought about my apartment, about the guilt jar. I thought about every bill drafted from my account, every emergency I had solved while they praised Jessica for her dreams. I opened my laptop right there in the car, the screen glowing in the dark. My fingers flew across the keys as I pulled up my records. Mortgage, $800 a month. Utilities, $400. Car payments, $600. Insurance, $180. Phones, $120. Internet and cable, $150. Streaming, $45. Emergency extras, $200. I typed the totals, added them line by line. The number stared back at me, cold and undeniable. Nearly $30,000 a year. Over 8 years, close to $250,000. My hands trembled as I read it again and again. I could have bought a house with that money. I could have built an investment portfolio. I could have built a future. Instead, I had built nothing but their comfort. And in return, I was told I didn't belong. Lauren leaned closer, her voice low but steady. This is your proof. This is everything you have done. It's time to stop. I closed my eyes, letting the number burn itself into my mind. For years, I had equated sacrifice with love, thinking if I gave enough, one day they would finally see me. But love was never returned. Only expectation. When I opened my eyes again, the tears had dried. My chest still hurt, but beneath the pain was something new. Resolve. For the first time, I wasn't just mourning what I had lost. I was beginning to see the shape of what I could reclaim. I shut the laptop gently. I'm done, I whispered, more to myself than to Lauren. This ends now. Lauren nodded, her eyes soft with pride. Good. It's time you took back your life. We sat in silence for a while, the river stretching dark and endless before us. Yet, for the first time in years, I felt something close to freedom stirring in my chest. When I finally started the car again, I no longer felt like I was running from the house I had left behind. I felt like I was driving towards something new. By the time I pulled into the parking lot of my apartment building, the streets were empty, the world quiet under a blanket of snow. I carried the laptop upstairs, set it on my desk, and sat staring at the spreadsheet one more time. The numbers still glared back, but now it didn't feel like a chain. It felt like a map showing me every step I had taken, and pointing to the place where I would finally stop. I leaned back in my chair and let out a long breath. For the first time in years, I was not planning how to save them. I was planning how to save myself. I turned the laptop back on and opened every account I had been managing. The mortgage was first. I pulled up the auto payment settings, my name listed as the account holder, scheduled for the first of every month. My finger hovered for a moment over the cancel button. Then I clicked. A confirmation screen asked if I was sure. I pressed yes. The weight that left my chest was immediate. Next came the utilities. Electric, water, gas. All linked to my debit card. All quietly draining me month after month. I removed my information, typed in Dad's full name, and forwarded the login details to his email. The confirmation message told me billing responsibility had been transferred. I imagined their faces when the next statement arrived. The car loans were harder. I remembered signing the first payment, telling myself it was temporary. I remembered Dad handing Jessica the keys like he had earned them, while I stood in the doorway with empty hands. Now I stared at the account balance, my name tied to both vehicles. With a steady breath, I called the lender, waited through the automated prompts, and finally reached a representative. I explained calmly that I would no longer be responsible, and that payments must revert to Robert and Linda Miller. She confirmed my request. When I hung up, my palms were damp, but my heart felt steady. Insurance was next. Auto, home, medical. Every policy tied to my accounts. I pulled each one up, line by line, and sent official cancellation notices. I copied Mom on the emails with a short note. You are now responsible for these premiums. I will not be renewing coverage. Then came the family cell phone plan. That one made me laugh bitterly. For years, they complained about the bill while refusing to drop Jessica's newest iPhone upgrade. I opened the provider's site, changed the password, and removed every device except mine. I sent another email. Service for your numbers will be suspended in 3 days unless you create your own plan. The internet and cable followed. The login showed streaming marathons, late-night game shows, and endless data usage that I had funded without a word. I deleted my card and removed their devices. For the first time in 8 years, their Wi-Fi would not be mine to provide. Finally, I turned to the home security system. That one had been my idea after a neighbor's break-in. I had spent nearly $1,000 on cameras, sensors, and smart locks, convincing myself I was keeping them safe. Now I opened the dashboard, exported their settings, and pressed the shutdown button. The screen warned me all devices would go offline within minutes. I clicked anyway. Through the camera feed, I saw the Christmas tree lights flicker once, then go dark. The living room plunged into shadow. The smart thermostat disconnected. The locks reset. One by one, the icons grayed out until the house I had protected for years sat in complete silence, powerless and unguarded. I stared at the screen, my breath caught in my throat. It felt like watching the end of a chapter in my life. That house was no longer my burden to manage. My parents would wake to darkness, confusion, maybe even panic. But for me it was liberation. The clock read nearly midnight when I finally closed the laptop. My apartment was quiet, but not the suffocating quiet I had felt so many times before. This quiet felt earned. I poured myself a glass of water, sat by the window, and watched the snow falling steadily. For the first time in nearly a decade, there were no payments hanging over my head. No alerts waiting on my phone. No emergencies ready to pull me back into their orbit. The accounts were closed, the ties severed. As I sipped the water, I thought about the words Dad had shouted at me. Paying bills doesn't make you family. He was right, in a way, though not the way he intended. Family is not proven through money, but it is also not destroyed by refusing to be used. I set the glass down, turned off the lamp, and let the darkness settle around me. This time it was not frightening. It was peaceful. And as I climbed into bed, I knew the real storm would arrive in the morning. The sun was already high when I finally stirred, the faint glow of winter light spilling through the blinds. My head felt heavy, not from lack of sleep, but from the weight of what I had done. I reached for my phone on the nightstand, and the screen lit up with more notifications than I had ever seen. 43 missed calls, 68 unread text messages, a dozen voicemails. My chest tightened as I scrolled. Each notification another reminder that the storm had broken. The first voicemail was from Mom, her voice high and frantic. Hannah, what is going on? The power went out. The heat shut off. Everything stopped working. You need to fix this right now. The second was from Dad, his tone cold and cutting. Whatever game you are playing, it ends today. You have until noon to restore the accounts, or I am contacting our lawyer. This is elder abuse, Hannah, and it is against the law. Jessica's voice came next, shrill and furious. You've ruined Christmas. Do you even realize what you've done? I was supposed to have an important meeting today, and now I can't even leave the house because the car is gone. You are pathetic, Hannah. Fix this or don't bother calling yourself my sister. The next message twisted the knife further. Mom again, her words trembling. Your father had chest pains this morning. He's at the hospital now. The stress of what you did pushed him over the edge. If anything happens to him, it will be on you. Please, Hannah, call me back. My stomach dropped, guilt flooding me in an instant. I sat frozen on the edge of the bed, phone pressed to my chest. Had I really caused a heart attack? Was my father lying in a hospital bed because I finally stood up for myself? Before panic swallowed me whole, another notification buzzed. A text from Natalie. Don't believe what they are saying. No one is at the hospital. They are at the house with police officers. Uncle Robert looks fine, just angry. I let out a shaky breath and scrolled further. Another voicemail, this time Dad again, voice booming with rage. You think you can humiliate us? I told the officers everything. You've hacked our accounts. You're going to regret this. I opened the security app on my laptop, half afraid I had already lost access. To my surprise, the backup feed I had downloaded still connected. The screen flickered to life, showing the living room of the house I had once protected. There they were, all three of them. Dad, pacing with red cheeks, waving his arms at two uniformed police officers who looked more confused than convinced. Mom sat on the couch, wringing her hands, not a tear on her face, despite the voicemail about crying at the hospital. Jessica stood by the Christmas tree, arms crossed, scowling like a teenager who had just been grounded. The cameras had no sound, but their body language told me everything. Dad was not sick. He was angry. Mom was not broken. She was pretending. Jessica was not a victim. She was fuming at losing control. I sat back in my chair, the knot of guilt loosening as quickly as it had formed. Their lie had been exposed before it even had time to take root. Another text came through from Natalie. The police are leaving soon. They told your parents this is a civil matter. Everyone is upset, but honestly, they looked embarrassed when the officers didn't take their side. I closed my eyes and let the words sink in. Embarrassed. That was new. For years they had hidden behind me, behind the comfort I provided, behind the image of a perfect family. But now the curtain had been pulled back. The neighbors would see the police cars. Relatives would hear whispers. Their pride had cracked, and I had not even needed to raise my voice. I opened one more voicemail, curiosity pulling me despite myself. This one was from Mom again, her voice lower this time, almost pleading. Hannah, please. The mortgage company called. They said the payment was canceled. What are we supposed to do? We don't have that kind of money. Just come over, talk this out. We can fix this as a family. Family. The word no longer stung. It rang hollow, stripped of the power it once had over me. I set the phone down, letting it buzz again with another call I did not answer. For the first time in years, their chaos was not mine to manage. The lies, the threats, the dramatics. They could keep all of it. I turned back to the laptop. The frozen feed still showing the darkened living room. The Christmas tree lights were off, the house wrapped in shadows. It was more than a technical shutdown. It was a symbol. The control they had over me, the expectation, the guilt had gone out just as suddenly as those lights. The storm had come exactly as I had expected, but for the first time I was standing on the outside of it, watching rather than drowning. And as the snow fell quietly outside my window, I realized their lies could no longer bind me. They had lost the power to keep me in the dark. Dad's voice boomed through my voicemail again that afternoon, harsher than ever. He barked that he had already spoken with my cousin Gary, who was a lawyer, and that what I had done could be considered financial abuse. He swore papers were being drawn up, and that I would regret humiliating him in front of the neighbors. I stared at the phone for a long moment before pulling up Gary's number myself. We hadn't spoken in years. Gary answered on the second ring, his voice brisk but not unfriendly. Hannah, long time, what's going on? I explained everything. The years of payments, the dinner table explosion, Dad's threats. When I finished, there was a silence, then a laugh. Hannah, your father is bluffing. There is no law in Michigan or anywhere else that requires an adult child to financially support their parents. You were doing it voluntarily. If anything, continuing under those conditions could look like exploitation on their part. Not yours. He paused. And the accounts were in your name, correct? Yes, all of them, I replied. Then you had every legal right to close them. End of story. Relief washed over me so quickly my knees went weak. Thank you, Gary, I whispered. meaning it more than I had expected. He cleared his throat. Honestly, Hannah, I'm glad you called. People have seen the way things work in your family for years. Maybe now it's time the truth comes out. Later that day, Aunt Barbara called. I could hear the tightness in her voice. The police left hours ago, but the whole neighborhood saw. People are talking. Robert made such a scene. I'm sorry, honey, but you should know you're not the one they're criticizing. It's them. I pictured the squad cars in the driveway, the flashing lights. Neighbors peeking from behind curtains, whispers forming before the officers had even driven away. The Millers, the proud family, undone on Christmas morning. Uncle George got on the line next. You did what you had to do, Hannah. We all know how much you've carried. Frankly, I'm surprised it took this long. The most surprising call came later that evening from Aunt Diane, my mom's older sister. Her voice cracked as she spoke. I should have said something years ago. I saw how they favored Jessica, how they leaned on you, but every time I tried to bring it up, your mother shut me out. She went quiet for a moment. People deserve to know the truth, Hannah. You've been keeping that family afloat while Jessica drained them dry. Her words struck like a bolt of clarity. It wasn't just me who knew. Others had seen too. The next day, Barbara and George went over to my parents' house. Natalie later told me what happened. They sat in the living room with Mom and Dad, the air thick with embarrassment. Barbara said firmly that she had watched me bring groceries year after year, watched me sacrifice vacations, and that enough was enough. Diane backed her up, reminding them that Jessica had borrowed thousands over the years, and never once repaid a cent. Jessica tried to protest, but George cut her off. Everyone knows, Jess. We've watched you spin one scheme after another while Hannah quietly covered the basics. You've been lying to your own parents, letting them believe you were helping when it was Hannah all along. Natalie described the silence that followed. Mom's face drained of color. Dad's jaw clenched so tightly he couldn't speak. And Jessica, for once in her life, had nothing to say. Her lips moved but no sound came. She sat there exposed with no defense left. The image gave me a strange mix of sorrow and satisfaction. Sorrow for the years wasted. For the love I had chased like a mirage. Satisfaction because finally, the truth had been spoken out loud, not just by me, but by others who had seen and chosen to stay silent until now. By evening, more messages trickled in, this time from relatives who had heard the story. Some were sympathetic, some angry at my parents for putting me in that position, and a few simply curious. The narrative my parents had spun for years, that Jessica was the golden child and I was the distant one, had cracked wide open. I sat by my window again that night, the snow falling in soft sheets across Detroit, and thought about justice. Not the kind you find in courtrooms or contracts, but the quiet kind. The kind that comes when the truth can no longer be hidden. When the lies collapse under their own weight. Jessica's silence at that living room confrontation echoed in my mind. For all her bravado, all her big talk, she had been unmasked in front of the very people who had always believed her. And my parents, who had thrown me out of their Christmas dinner, were now sitting in the wreckage of their pride, forced to face what they had ignored for far too long. The consequences had finally begun, not by my hands but by the truth itself. And for the first time I didn't feel the need to fix anything. I only needed to let it play out. Winter turned to spring, and the distance between me and my parents became more than just emotional. It was practical, measured in bills they now had to pay, and responsibilities they could no longer shift onto me. Word reached me through Natalie and Barbara about the changes at their house. Dad had taken a part-time job as a security guard at a warehouse. The man who once carried himself with pride about running an auto plant shift was now standing watch at a gate. Mom had quietly added more hours at the dental office, her cheerful front at work hiding the exhaustion at home. Jessica, who had spoken so confidently about her fitness app, had let it dissolve like all the projects before it. Without family money to cushion her, she had taken a job at a sporting goods store, folding leggings and selling sneakers. The irony was not lost on me. While their lives adjusted downward, mine shifted upward. At the fintech company in Detroit, my team's successful project earned me more recognition than I had ever expected. In March, my manager called me into his office and told me I was being considered for a leadership position. A promotion that would have seemed out of reach a year earlier suddenly felt possible, maybe even deserved. I poured my energy into work, not because I needed to prove myself to my family anymore, but because I finally wanted to prove something to myself. Outside of work, I made time for healing. I found a therapist in downtown Detroit who specialized in family trauma. Every Tuesday evening I sat in a small office with warm lighting and poured out pieces of myself I had never shared before. The anger, the guilt, the endless hunger for validation. Slowly, week by week, the heaviness began to lift. In January, I joined a support group for adult children of toxic parents. Sitting in a circle of strangers who spoke stories so similar to mine was both heartbreaking and liberating. We laughed together about manipulations that once made us cry. We recognized patterns that had kept us trapped. We encouraged one another when doubt crept in. For the first time I felt less alone. By April, I rewarded myself with something small but meaningful. I booked a weekend trip to Chicago, staying at a boutique hotel near the river. It was the same city where years earlier I had sent my parents for Mom's birthday, footing the bill while they barely thanked me. This time I walked through Millennium Park on my own, drank coffee at a rooftop cafe, and allowed myself to savor the luxury without guilt. The freedom tasted better than anything I had known. It was during that trip that I met Michael, a friend of a friend who happened to join us for dinner one night. He was an architect, tall and thoughtful, with a laugh that filled the room without needing to be loud. I hesitated at first, unsure if I had the energy for anything new. But on our third date, when I finally told him the story of my family, he reached across the table, squeezed my hand and said softly, "Family is not who you are born to. Family is who treats you like you matter." Those words sank into me deeper than I expected. They reminded me of Barbara's calls, of George's steady support, of Diane's confession, of Natalie's brave honesty. The people who had stood by me after the collapse of Christmas were the ones who deserved the title of family. They checked on me without demanding. They celebrated my achievements without envy. They loved me without conditions. Months later, I still heard occasional whispers of my parents' struggles. They had sold the old house and moved into a modest rental. Dad complained often, but he kept working. Mom's health wavered with the extra hours. Jessica still spun stories about new opportunities, but no one was funding her anymore. Their world had changed, and though part of me felt a flicker of pity, I knew it was not mine to fix. Instead, I built something different. I filled my apartment with laughter from friends, with quiet evenings alone, with the steady hum of a life no longer chained to guilt. My savings account grew, my confidence grew, and with Michael by my side, I began to imagine a future that was truly mine, built not on sacrifice for others but on balance and choice. When I look back now at that Christmas night, I no longer feel only pain. I see it as the moment I was freed. The night the lies broke apart and the truth finally took shape. The night I stopped begging to belong and started choosing where I did. If you have ever faced a family who made you feel less, who took your giving for granted, who confused loyalty with control, know this. You are not alone and you have the right to step away, to heal, to build something better.